When we stand and fight together, there is power when we organize.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. Little cooler in the neighborhood, at least in our neighborhood. The heat in other places still unbearable. And again, going back to we've got a now full head of steam forward. Start talking about infrastructure, rebuilding, retro engineering, planning for the future, new technology to deal with the changes that are coming. And, I read a story the other day about the fact that our concrete just isn't, it's not lasted that long. It's meant to last like 50 years. Not quite. And how we've changed, a couple thousand years ago, they could make concrete that's still around today. Today, not so much. But again, I go back to our planned obsolescence and how can we make it cheaper so that we can make more of it down the road. But we got so much work to do. And yet Congress, not so much. You know why? Because they're going to be fined. Thank you very much. The rest of us, well, struggling. But some good news coming out of the economy a little bit. Some good news coming all around. In fact, I saw our governor, Tom Wolf, out in Philadelphia handing out free ice cream. And who doesn't love free ice cream on a hot day? And it was out there, as part of Joe Biden's, get out and sell the fact that we're doing better. We're moving in the right direction. America's back, they say. The punchline goes, shots in arms, checks in banks, jobs coming back, and free scoops of ice cream. Who couldn't be against free scoops of ice cream? And look, we are doing better, much better on the pandemic front. There are people who are being vaccinated, have been vaccinated. We're moving in the right direction. Good stuff. This month, the checks are going to start rolling out for families with kids. And that's going to help boost the economy a little bit, help keep things steamrolling along. As we saw today, the economy added 850,000 jobs in the month of June. That is, a little bit above what they're anticipating. The unemployment rate ticked up 1.1% to 5.9% from 5.8%, and that's a good thing. That means more people are coming back to look for jobs. There are more people looking to participate. That is a good thing. And look, the quicker we get back on our feet, get back moving, the better it's going to be for all of us. Especially when we start, if we get the infrastructure bill that we desperately need. And, I had this really long conversation today over, how are we going to do all of these things? How are we going to get people into these jobs? And you go, look, if we could put a man on the moon, if we could rebuild Europe after World War II, if we could, find the vaccine for polio and now COVID-19, we can do things that just got to put our minds to it. As a country, when we unite, we come together, we can do things. I still believe that. Now, I have some people who maybe not so much. I still believe that we can, as a country, unite around the idea that we need to move forward and rebuild. Because I had someone today tell me, well, that electric car thingy of yours, that's a pipe dream. And you go, no, I don't think it's a pipe dream. I think it's something that can be done. We just have to have the infrastructure. Again, it comes back to the infrastructure. You need, a charging station on every corner like you have a gas station. We didn't always have gas stations on every corner. In fact, my grandfather for years carried a jug of gas in the back of the truck just in case. So again, put our mind to it. Smart policy, sound investment. We can get things done, and we're going to have to, and quickly, because I remember like James Inhofe from Oklahoma, bringing snowballs into the Senate. saying, there's no such thing as climate change or global warming because we got snowballs. You got George Will saying, it's summertime, it's hot. When you look at this little town in Canada, 121 degrees that burnt to the ground, just basically, I'm struggling with heat temperatures that will almost boil your blood. I was reading something the other day that said, at 106 degrees, your organs start to shut down. Now, think about 121 degrees. Think about in Pakistan when it was 126 degrees. And this isn't like in Arizona where it's a dry heat. This is humidity. This is not good. Now, there are some who are going to say, hey, we can solve climate change. We can reverse some of the effects. And I hope we can. I'm not a climatologist. I hope we can move in that direction. But at some point, we got to start talking about how are we going to survive on this planet that is for some people going to be unlivable. And that comes back to technology. That comes back to innovation. And while, look, I want to solve our climate crisis, I want to move in the right direction when it comes to alternative energies and all that, get off the dirty stuff. We're still going to need the next generation of technology to move us and get us there. And that's going to take investment from government. There are no private corporations. There are no wonderful benefactors. There's no philanthropists. There's nobody who can do it other than from us through our government. And sadly, in Congress, there's really nothing going on there. And it's angering. It's frustrating. And we have a court system that is set up to block all of this stuff. I sit and I think about, what my great-grandchildren will think about, about this moment in history. What will they think of the decisions that we made when they learn about this era in history? When they flip open their browser and they find the history page that goes back to, the 2000s. What will they be taught? That we were a bunch of science deniers who didn't see the reality right in front of us, or that we rose to our challenge. We rose to our moment. We look at the greatest generation, my grandparents' generation. We looked at them as the greatest generation because they did. They rose to their moment. They rose to the challenge. They fought fascism overseas. They came home. They fought fascism at home. They pushed back against the corporate hard, play by the rules, get ahead. And what we have is a Supreme Court right now hell-bent on repealing the 20th century. Hell-bent on it. Taking us back to the good old days of the company store. I was talking with a friend today who said, without the 20th century, I would have never been able to go to college. None of us would have been able to go to lead the lives we've led. Because we'd still be indebted to the company store. We'd still be nose to the grind in these factory towns, where the robber barons would be lining their pockets at the expense. Now, understand, they're still doing it, and doing it at a record pace. Because thanks again to our Supreme Court, who continually sides with corporate policy. It's angering. It's frustrating, and the one way that we can change that. I keep coming back to this idea of the power of the vote. I say it all the time. We still, at this moment, while the billionaires have all the money, we've still outprocreated them. If we could get our heads out of our rears and pay attention, we still have the ability to vote. But, thanks to the Supreme Court and Republican legislatures across the country, that window is closing. And I look at this story coming out of Kansas. The League of Women Voters. The freaking League of Women Voters of Kansas. They are a nonpartisan group. Their job has always been just to promote people for voting. They always put together, candidate forums in a nonpartisan way. It's about democracy. It's about bringing people together. It's about information. They are now suspending all of their voter registration drives. because the law in Kansas, this House Bill 2183, puts a bunch of restrictions in the way and massive penalties for people who even touch someone else's ballot, help anyone fill out their ballot. In fact, the punishment, 17 months in prison, $100,000 fine for helping. Now they're saying, look, we're not going to take a chance on any of this because, we don't want Granny who goes around and helps people register to vote and helps people, cast their ballot. We don't want her going to jail for 17 months and being socked with $100,000 fine. So they're not doing any of it. And this is that moment. This is that time where they're usually out registering people to vote, especially young people. They're at the fairs, they're at the festivals, they're all over the place. Wherever there's a gathering, you can see one of their tents out there registering people. And they're not the only one. There are a bunch of other non-profit groups out there doing it as well. And you know yourself, if you've gone to any of these street fairs or any of these festivals or any of that, you see somebody out there registering voters. They're like, hey, we can't do this anymore because we're not going to jail because of how restrictive and how crazy this law is. Now, the law was passed over the governor's veto. This Governor Laura Kelly vetoed it, both 2183 and 2332, which again, another one of those anti-voting things, restricting the mail-in ballot process and the distribution of applications. She vetoed them both. They overrode the veto because they have a 2/3 majority of Republicans in the legislature. Fortunately, here in Pennsylvania, when our governor vetoed it, it stayed vetoed because not yet have the Republicans gerrymandered this state into a one-sided state. But it got me thinking: is this the future? I've always believed, regardless of if I agree with you or I don't, I think everyone should have the right to participate, the right to cast your ballot. And I want it opened up to more people. I think the more people who vote, the better the outcomes will be. I know that may be a little naive, but we're moving into this kind of weird world where some people are okay with you not being able to vote. Some people are okay with putting these barriers up as long as it doesn't affect them. And this is the weird kind of moment that we're in, because this is one of those things where the League of Women Voters, they're nonpartisan. There are Republicans and Democrats in this. And you've got to wonder how far is too far and how much of this will end up touching Republican voters as well. And is there hope of being a backlash against it? Or is this, hey, they're on the team. And the team is okay with massive barriers. The team is okay, discriminating against poor and working class voters. Because ultimately that's what this comes down to. Look, they are targeting minority voters, certainly, and they said so. The Supreme Court said, it's okay. It's okay if there are different outcomes for whites and blacks. That's okay. It's okay if they gerrymander a state with the sole intention of putting all of the minority voters in one district and all of the white voters in another. They think that's okay. I don't. I'm not horribly against gerrymandering as long as the gerrymandering is done to make competitive districts, because I think competitive districts bring good ideas. I think the more competitive you can be, the more ideas you'll have. And sadly, our friends in the GOP have no ideas. And the ideas that they've had, and I've said this before 1,000 times, are horrible. I've been screaming about trickle-down economics for decades now because it was bad. It was a bad idea. Supply-side voodoo Reaganomics was a horrible idea. And they knew it was a horrible idea back then. Unfettered free trade, bad idea. They knew it was a bad idea back then. And these voter restrictions, horrible idea. Now, There are those who say, well, now what you do is you go out and you organize and you get people to jump through the hoops and stand in line for hours and hours at a time. It shouldn't be this difficult to vote. I go back to that argument of, well, you need a driver's license to rent a car. You need a driver's license to stay in a hotel. Yeah, but I don't have a constitutional right to stay in a hotel or drive a car. I do, however, have a constitutional right to access the ballot box. Because after all, that is the foundation, the bedrock of this entire experiment. If nobody believes what comes out of it, if everybody thinks that the game is rigged, who wins? The authoritarians. The people who are willing to say, no, set that aside. We know best. And that's scary stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how this suit in Kansas is going up, because, of course, the League of Women Voters and others have filed a lawsuit. And we'll see where this plays out. I have to wonder, where the Kansas State Supreme Court is going to come down on this. I love the fact that in New Hampshire, the state Supreme Court came down against these kind of restrictions that actually didn't allow them to crush the ability of people to have access to the ballot box. But, we're in a weird kind of time. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should we be more restrictive? Should we go to thumbprints maybe? DNA swabs? How far do you go to make sure? Do we chip people? How far do you go? That's the question. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, going to talk a little bit about Donald Rumsfeld's passing this past week. What is Rummy's legacy? I've had some people who tell me he was the greatest mind in national security. I've had others say, well, if they knew where they buried him, they would dig him up and kill him again. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day known as the East St. Louis Race Riot. It is considered the worst case of labor-related violence of the 20th century and one of the worst race riots in American history. At the time, East St. Louis, Illinois, was an industrial hub along the Mississippi River across from St. Louis, Missouri. Production demands for World War I intensified the Great Migration. As African Americans emigrated from the South, filling the demand for industrial labor, tensions grew at workplaces and in the communities in which they settled. That spring, black and white workers had been hired to scab on a local strike. The violence began on May 28th when trade unionists marched to the mayor's office protesting the black labor they considered unfair competition. It quickly turned into an anti-black riot. The National Guard was called out to quell the violence. And on this day, 2 days of rioting began when a car of white men drove through a black neighborhood and fired at a group of blacks. Racist mobs killed as many as 200 African Americans. 6,000 more were left homeless. Many remarked bitterly that the police and National Guard stood by, indifferent to the race violence around them. The president of the Illinois Federation of Labor insisted that employers were to blame for using Southern blacks to break the back of labor. Socialist Party leader Eugene V. Debs declared that the riots were, quote, a foul blot upon the labor movement. Debs continued, had the labor movement freely opened their doors to the Negro instead of barring him, the atrocious crime of East St. Louis would have never blackened the pages of American history. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this week, Donald Rumsfeld passed away, and I know there are a lot of folks with a lot of folks cheering. To be honest, my memory of Rummy shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, that was one of them. But the one that sticks in my head, asked about where the weapons of mass destruction were. If you go back to the Bush era. And his response was, well, we know where they are. They're north, south, east, and west of Tikrit. And I'm going, wait a second. So they're literally everywhere? And you still couldn't find them? Very bizarre. And here to share some thoughts on the legacy of Rummy, the neocons, and talk a little bit about the Bush era as well. I've asked our good friend Jared Yates Sexton to come talk with us. Jared is a political analyst and host of the Muckrike podcast. Make sure you check out his blog over at A Nation Conquered. I think I got that right. Maybe I didn't. I'll ask Jared himself. Jared, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Did they screw up the?
It's dispatches from a collapsing state, but it's as close as you can get without getting there. That's what it was.
So, in other words, I didn't even hit the red side of a barn, but I tried. So let's go through this because Rummy passed. I found it interesting that he spent his last days in a place where they would take slaves to be tortured. But that's predictable. That's something expected. But thoughts?
I have to tell you, I have a loathing of Donald Rumsfeld that is incredible. And hearing that he had passed, I took a sigh of relief because I have to tell you, and you know this as well as I do, Rumsfeld was one of those Forrest Gump-like figures who was present at so many major moments in American history. Rumsfeld, of course, was hanging around the Nixon White House. And for Richard Nixon to look at a human being and say, that person is ruthless, that says something. He then ended up in the Ford administration, where he helped push trickle-down economics and Reaganomics eventually. Then he gets into the Bush administration, where he becomes a total war criminal, leads to the death of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, and by the way, spends all of our riches and treasures and makes sure that we can have healthcare, we can have education, infrastructure. One of the most detestable figures in American history, honest to God.
Yeah, no, and I remember that era. Actually, most of that, I was just a kid when Nixon was president, but I remember during the Reagan years, the H.W. Bush years, and obviously during W's years. And the one thing that's happened over the last few is Trump has kind of made the Bush years like, well, it wasn't so bad back then. And you go, yes, it was that bad.
It was so much worse than what people are remembering. I am what some people would refer to as quote unquote very online. And a lot of people who are very online have a very short attention span. And as a result, George W. Bush's presidency has been quote unquote rehabilitated. He was doing all this stuff around the inauguration with Obama and Clinton. It was like the quote unquote normal presidents. Right. There was nothing normal about the Bush administration, the atrocities they committed, the mistakes that they made, the elitism and classism and racism that they trafficked in. This is a group of people that deserve to be maligned, and not just maligned right now, but maligned into perpetuity. This was a group of criminals and just absolute cruel monsters.
No, history needs to remember these neocons for who they were. These, as you said, these are evil people. These are people who, when they go to the special room, down below, they're going to get applause because they were the worst of the worst in my view.
They really were, and we're living in the aftermath of their America. Like any conversation about Donald Trump or this current anti-democratic, cruel, fascistic Republican Party has to begin with the Bush administration. We have to understand that they have such a large hand in creating this modern moment. And yeah, George W. Bush was not Donald Trump, but that does not excuse the crimes that these people committed.
No, you're right. But, I would go back even further because as you point out, Rumsfeld, Cheney, Wolfowitz, all of those people, they were back there during the Nixon years. All of this was, you could even argue they were part of that whole Powell memo movement of billionaires who were funding all these bad ideas that have destroyed what was the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization and a livable society into what is now this hyper-militaristic, angry, hate-filled society that you turn on Fox News, it's what you hear.
I told you before we went on the air, I really appreciated your opening remarks because to really get down to the bottom of who these people are, they believe that there are elites in society. There are people who are born to rule. There are people through hereditary, ancestry, whether or not it's the fact that they're white, whether or not they're wealthy. These are the people who are supposed to rule society.
Right. Don't forget religious.
Right. And everybody else can come up with their bowls and ask for a little bit more soup or some more scraps. That's who Donald Rumsfeld was. That's who Cheney is. That's who the Republican Party is. These are people who believe that there are certain people who should rule everything and everybody underneath them should just be happy they're allowed to live in the United States of America. And we have to really take a look at that and understand that is who the Republican Party and the right actually are.
No, and you also have to look at, if you're talking about any of them, you have to look at how they used 9/11 to just basically, get every one of their wet dream wish list items checked off. And, everyone always talks about 9/11 and the Project for a New American Century report that came out almost a decade earlier, calling for a new Pearl Harbor. And look, we know that they knew what was coming. There was the August 6 PDB that evidently Bush didn't read, but I guarantee you Cheney did.
And listen, this is a horror. It really is. To truly look at what happened on September 11th and in the aftermath, it is a horrible thing. The Bush administration was warned time and time and time again. They could not be bothered to head off this threat. And eventually, and this is what I wrote about on my Substack, Donald Rumsfeld on 9/11, before Ground Zero had even stopped smoking, he had been told by one person after another that this was Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. And all that he cared about was Iraq. That's all that these people cared about because they were interested in pursuing a geopolitical strategy that they had wanted for years and years and years. These are people who think that, again, they are elite, and if they can find a good story, that will go ahead and make legitimate any action that they needed to have in order to go out and cause preemptive war.
Yep.
It was a lie built upon a lie, built upon a lie. It cost hundreds of thousands of lives and all of our money, all of our future, and has led us to where we are right now.
And I remember the Operation Iraqi Liberation. Oil.
It was all oil, and it was about getting corporations into the Middle East, and it was about a group of people. And this is really what it comes down to. And I feel like this is something that falls through the cracks. The modern Republican Party believes that they know better than everybody else. They are smarter, they are more elite, they are just inherently better than everybody else. And they knew that they did not have Iraq dead to rights for this attack, but they could go in and they could turn it into a crusade. They could make it a holy war, and it would make America this champion, and then, by the way, help a bunch of corporations, help a bunch of private interests, and also get access to a bunch of resources. It is a war crime on a scale that I don't think most people are really comfortable dealing with, to be honest.
No, I mean, I have a friend who comes on the program often, former Congressman Bob Ney, and he says he wants transparency in what he was told as a congressman when he voted for authorization. He wants all of that stuff, all the lies that were presented to him, to be public. Because look, he wants to cleanse his soul. I mean, at the end of the day, he voted for something that he believed was honest and was right. And he now says, I wish I could tell you, but it's all a lie.
It was absolutely all a lie. And if you look at all the documents of this, they basically paid some people in Iraq who made a living off of creating false intelligence.
Curveball.
Curveball. They told Cheney, they told Rumsfeld, they told Wolfowitz everything that they wanted to hear because they saw an opportunity to make money and gain power in this entire situation. The war in Iraq is one of the biggest mistakes in modern American history. And if you want to draw a direct line, it's absolutely there between the war in Iraq and where we are now.
No, you're right.
These people, yeah.
No, and to highlight this, I mean, because there were two separate, in my view, correct me if you think I'm wrong, there are two separate ideologies at play there, both with the same ends, going after Iraq and privatizing and taking that over. But you had the neocons who wanted the money. It was about the oil, it was about business, it was about corporate America. And then you had the evangelicals, you had the Bushes, who it was about the end times. We're beginning the rapture, and this is the end of humanity, and both of them are bad, but both of them are the center of the Republican Party.
They're very different. And this is something that we need to understand, which is the neoconservatives, the people who studied under like Leo Strauss, they didn't care what the story was, as long as the story created unity, as long as it created purpose. These are people who saw the world in ones and zeros, how to make money, how to get resources. And I'll tell you who they appealed to. People like George W. Bush. George W. Bush was a simple person who believed what he was being told. George W. Bush was the kind of person who turned on Fox News and was like, this is crazy. I can't believe this is going on. And that is the essence of the modern Republican Party. There are the people who pull the strings and the people who believe the fear mongering. And it came together in the Iraq War. And now we're seeing the fact that it used to be a Venn diagram. Now it's a circle. And that is actually more frightening than anything else, the fact that that Venn diagram became a circle.
Yeah, no, because, all of the stuff that we're talking about is what brought us to the place that we're in now. This hyper-militaristic idea, this idea that war now on the home front, we've got now domestic terrorism, we've got militia groups talking about coming in August and overthrowing the government and reinstalling Donald Trump. We've got some real craziness going on, and I argue it all points back to what went on during that era, during that time.
Yeah, this is some real bitter medicine, and I'm sorry to come here on a Friday night and drop this on people, but you cannot have a war like our forever wars and not have those wars come home. The militarism that led to Iraq and Afghanistan eventually infected the body proper in the United States. You can't go out and torture people. You can't go out and violate sovereignty and not expect the country later on to adopt militarism and fascistic tendencies. There's a direct line, again, between Iraq and Afghanistan and people in my neighborhood driving around in like mercenary style trucks with a bunch of mercenary style iconography. There is a direct relationship between what happened with Iraq and Afghanistan and this current crisis we're in now.
No, and now you see, to your point, now you see the Twitter there. Every once in a while, I see pictures of, what you would associate as, terrorists, flying the Al Qaeda flag, and then a whole bunch of rednecks riding around in a pickup truck, and they look identical, other than the flag that they're flying and the name on the book that they're waving.
And this is a really, really disturbing thing, which is what we're experiencing right now is the other side of the coin of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Like, I have to tell you, as somebody who grew up in these evangelical white supremacist circles, they admired them. They disagreed with them in their worldview, but they said, you know what, those people, they're willing to die for something, and we should learn from them. What we're dealing with right now is an infection that was started in that era, which was the message that the Bush administration and people like Donald Rumsfeld told people, which is, oh, you want to defeat the terror, you need to become the terror. And eventually what ends up happening, which was Al-Qaeda's plan from the very beginning, is you inflict a wound and eventually that infection is going to overwhelm the body. And that's where we are now, unfortunately.
Is there any lesson from this? I mean, with his passing, is there a moment where we go, this era now ends, or does that happen when Cheney goes?
Oh my God. I mean, Cheney and Rumsfeld are, they're bosom buddies. They really, really are. And I wrote in my article that they're cautionary tales, right? If you look at Rumsfeld's entire career, it wasn't ideology. He didn't care about anything. It was always an ends to a mean, right? Or a means to an end. It was always about moving people around on a chessboard like pawns. It is a cynical, pessimist type of politics that leads to nowhere but ruin. And if you look at Rumsfeld and Cheney, the lesson is we have to stand for something. We have to have actual principles instead of these, out there political cudgels that these people trafficked in.
Yeah, it's I never want to say I'm happy someone's gone. They have family, they have loved ones, but I'm not unhappy.
Listen, Donald Rumsfeld passed surrounded by his family and friends. That's the best end that a person can hope for. But I have to tell you that Donald Rumsfeld was one of the most damaging individuals in modern American history. And this is a person who, right up until the end, never showed even an ounce of regret for the damage and the crimes that he had committed. And you're exactly right. This is one of the situations. I mean, Kissinger. Any day now, we're going to say goodbye to Henry Kissinger and wonder, what are we supposed to think about somebody like that? But this is a person who did way more damage than any good that they had committed.
Yeah, and the same thing with Dick Cheney. I mean, it's, their legacy is one of horror, of terror, and of harming this country in ways that you look around us right now are going to be felt for, I would argue, for a decade to come.
No, it is a tragic legacy of ash. These people are people who've destroyed lives and civilizations and led to untold amounts of suffering. And the political consequences of what they did in these actions that they took, you and I are going to be living in it for years and years.
Yeah, and it's not just our reputation around the world that, we tortured people and we killed, hundreds of thousands of folks. It's what the damage we've inflicted on our own people. Our economy that was, basically just ripped to shreds. The massive redistribution of wealth that went from working people to the elitist and the entitled. It's a horrible time. So last bit, is there a path forward?
I mean, the path forward is to understand that the money and the resources that we wasted on these wars and doled out these tragedies could have been spent on education, infrastructure, healthcare.
Yep.
And that is the important thing. We need to rein in imperial America and start working on actual human projects.
That is the answer. Jared, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I hope folks will take a look at the Substack page, Dispatches from a Collapsing State. Got it right this time.
There it is.
If you want to check out the book, and this is where I got the other thing from, the book is American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People, written by Jared Yates Sexton. Jared, I appreciate the time, man.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1822. That was the day that Denmark Vesey was hung for his role in allegedly plotting a slave rebellion in South Carolina. Vesey had been born into slavery in St. Thomas in the Caribbean. From there, he was brought to Charleston, South Carolina. He won the lottery and was able to purchase his freedom at the age of 32. Now a free man, Vesey worked as a skilled carpenter. He became a founder of a black congregation of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston. 4 years after it opened, authorities grew uneasy about the potential of the church to foster unrest among those under slavery. In response, they closed the church. Vasey and others began to organize black resistance to slavery. An informant revealed the plans before the uprising could take place. South Carolina authorities acted swiftly. Vasey stood trial and was found guilty. He was executed along with 35 of his supporters. The AME church was burned to the ground. Hysterical white leaders passed harsh new slave codes aimed at thwarting any future plots. Since his death, historians have debated the true extent of the plot and the evidence put forth at his trial. Vasey's name became a rallying cry in the fight against slavery. The church members continued to meet in secret. After the Civil War, the church formally took the name Emmanuel AME. The church became a symbol in the fight for black civil rights. In 2015, a white 21-year-old gunman murdered 9 people at the Emmanuel Church in a vicious hate crime.
Moses said, let my people go. If not, I'll smite your firstborn dead. Let my
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, to pick up where Jared left off, I look at the economic damage. And I mean, look, our soul was basically lost because of the war that they led us into. Look, I was all in favor of going after bin Laden. You go after Al-Qaeda. You go after who perpetrated 9/11. But to take that bizarre turn and go, no, we're going to go over this way. Never mind the guy who did it. We're going to go get this guy over here. And then all of the lies and all of the nonsense and all of the just the amazing amount of money that was thrown into this. So again, we've made the wealthy wealthier. And let's not forget about all the people who lost lives, lost limbs, lost minds, who, we kind of just, thanks. Here, take a photo with us. Sad stuff. But for me, I look at the economic part of it as well. They took what was really a prosperous economy for working people, and they destroyed it. As Jared pointed out, Rummy and Cheney were behind the whole supply side voodoo economics, the whole trickle down thing back in the 70s, and that Reagan picked up and ran forward on. They knew it was going to do exactly what it did, which was crush unions, crush the ability of working people to participate and to profit from the economy. And they give you just enough to keep you marginally happy. Then throw in a little bit of racism to keep you separated. Throw a little jealousy in there saying, hey, someone's getting something you're not. You're paying for it. And they create this tension so that the working class majority of this country is basically eating itself constantly. So they're not paying attention to what they're doing. I mean, how many people heard of the PNAC report, Project for a New American Century, that called in the 90s for another Pearl Harbor-like event? It was widely distributed. A lot of people read it. I know I did. Called for a new Pearl Harbor so that they could do all of the things that FDR did, only in their neocon mentality. Break up those unions, privatize everything, deregulate, break up the tax code to make sure that the wealthy get wealthier. Make America America again. Because they learned, what conservatives learned is that, after Pearl Harbor, FDR was able to get a lot of stuff done, did a lot of stuff to help people, passed a lot of legislation that created what was, again, the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. Took people out of company towns and out of company stores and gave them real power. If you're the elitists, if you're the entitled, working people with power, scares the living bejeebs out of you. So they have to be crushed. So they do, dumb stuff. Like right now, there's a guy running for Senate in Ohio, Josh Mandel. Snotty little kid. He tweeted out today that critical race theory is a more dangerous virus than corona. I'll bet he can barely spell critical race theory, but he's got the buzzword. So, of course, stupid people go, yeah, see, he knows it's worse than corona because corona's a hoax, because they bought this stuff. It's crazy. And the thing is the GOP always has a boogeyman. There's always a boogeyman, isn't there? Which is why you have all of these nimwits like Boebert and Green and Cawthorn and all of them down on the southern border because they're trying to recreate another boogeyman. Have you heard about caravans lately? You remember when it was all about the caravans? There are caravans coming here. There's a caravan every day. There are caravans. Understand, there are caravans all the time of people coming here because a lot of people want to come to the U.S. Where's that boogeyman? It's probably going to come back. Wait for it. It's like anything. Hang around a couple of minutes. They'll bring it back. If it worked the first time and it scared the you-know-what out of you, they're going to bring it back. Because ultimately, it's about keeping you distracted. It's about keeping your eyes somewhere else while they rob us blind. I saw this brilliant tweet today. A guy named Dan Price. I had forgotten about Dan Price. He was the CEO of a company, and this was several years ago, where he slashed his CEO pay down to I think, like $100,000 a year or something, so that he could pay each one of his workers $70,000 a year. And I remember at the time going, wow, this is a really good gimmick that he's figured out, or this is a really good guy. This is somebody who believes that to get and train and keep good people, you need to pay them. Well, he sent out a couple of tweets that caught my attention. One, he said the average American has a net worth of $505,000. Now, this is all stuff we already know. It's just that he tweeted it out again, and it caught my attention. We already know where the money in this country is. But he said the average American has a net worth of $505,000. The average. Now, Robert Reich does a really good thing. He says, if Shaquille O'Neal and Robert Reich are in a room, the average height is like 6'2". This is that. He goes on to say the median American has a net worth of $79,000. He says if wealth were distributed equally, you'd have $426,000 more, according to the math. He says in Belgium, the average person has $351,000, and the median wealth is $230,000. Poorer country, he says, richer people, because of how the pie is divided. We in this country, because of the Rumsfelds and the Cheneys and the Reagans and all of the people who've told us, no. If you give the rich people all the money, it'll come trickling down like rivers of golden honey. It'll be beautiful. It will be amazing because they're benevolent and they love you. That's my other favorite. And we know that's total bunk. We've been robbed blind. The working class of this country has been just ripped off at every turn. But he makes an interesting point that in a country like Belgium, where the wealth is distributed more equally, people have better lives. But here we're told, no, we could be the guy who has all the money and the hell with all those people below us. And somehow we buy it, even though we know not going to happen. We're not unfortunately going to be one of those people. He also points out that in July of 2009, the median household price was $182,000. The rent was $800. Healthcare costs $8,200. Student debt $20,000. The minimum wage was $7.25. You know where this is going. You go 12 years later to 2021. July 2021, the median house price $375,000. Median rent $1,150, healthcare costs $12,400, student debt $36,600, and the minimum wage still a whopping $7.25 an hour. And this again comes back to what I've been saying for the longest time. Working people have lost their bargaining power. And what's amazing is I hear working class people going, no, we can't possibly raise the minimum wage. Can't possibly go to $15 No, we can't, because it's going to hurt, because I won't get any. And we've been trained like this to think about our radical self-interest. It's all about me. Don't care about anything else. When in reality, what hooray for me and the hell with everybody else gets you is, well, you're in with everybody else eventually. And we all do worse. I mean, this is the weird part of all of this. When one guy has all the wealth, there's a problem. Right now, we can't get Republicans in Congress. We cannot get them to raise taxes on the very wealthy, even though we know where the money is. It's where it is. And they got it from us. The people who actually go to work every day and create that wealth that they then extract from us through lower wages, higher healthcare costs, non-existent retirement plans, gig employment, which is even worse. And then they tell us, hey, someone's going to take that away from you. You get this with the gig workers. They're going to pass the PRO Act and you're never going to work again. Scaring the living you-know-what out of people, because now they finally figured out a way to eke out an existence. They finally figured out, hey, how they can feed the kids, how they can keep a roof over there. They finally found something. And now they're going to come and take that away. Now, you pass something like the PRO Act that ensures that those people who are being exploited as gig workers, but they won't tell you that. No. I've never met an Uber driver who feels exploited. No, I'm my own boss. I do this because, I'm bored. Not that they need the money. They're bored. They needed something to get them out of the house. They work that 8-10 hour day job, and then they come, they drive the Uber for a couple hours a day because, hey, who wants to sit home with their family? It's crazy. But you know what? You pass the PRO Act, you make people employees, you get them to bargain for better wages. You get higher union density in industry, the wages go up sufficiently that you can actually make a living off of one job. In this country, and I know it's hard to believe. You used to be able to support a family, buy a house, take vacations, have a car, put the kids through college. You used to be able to do all that stuff on one income. It wasn't just on TV with Leave It to Beaver. It was actually possible. I know people who did it. I know people who went through college and then ended up graduating with no student loan debt because we hadn't massively saddled them with the cost of tuition. And all of this stuff comes back to, you go, what's the common denominator? The common denominator is our politics. The common denominator is the people that we put into power, the policies that they pursue, the stuff that they choose. That's what's done this. And here's the great part of it, because there is a great part of this. All of the horrible stuff that they've done, all of the deregulation, all of the union busting, all of the economic theft from workers, all of the moving and saddling people with massive debt and medical costs, and all of the stuff that they've done, it can be undone. It can be. You just have to have, people willing to do it. And voters willing to hold people accountable. Every day I get an email from this group who say, we need term limits. And I'm going, no, we need to exercise the term limits we already have. We need to throw the bums out. But here's the sad thing. We look at Congress in this weird way where Congress is horrible. They're all bad. They're all terrible, except my guy or my girl. They're fantastic. because they're out there fighting for me. But I look at the folks I look at the guy who represents me. He doesn't have my interest in mind. Scott Perry is probably one of the worst representatives in Congress. He has voted against everything that I think we need as a country, and as a rural area in this state. And people love him because he's telling it like it is. He was there on Treason Day. He was promoting Treason Day. Yet, I drive on half the roads around here. I can't get a cell signal. I pay through the nose for marginally decent internet because we haven't built our infrastructure. We haven't invested in the future because it's all about, I don't even know anymore. It's all about the tears of those libtards. I get that a lot. And it goes, how is that going to make your life better? See, for me, it always comes back to how do we get things done? How do we move forward? How do we make lives better? How do we give kids more opportunities as they grow up? How do we give families more opportunities, more security? See, these are things that, on the right anyway, you get no discussion about. You listen to Ted Cruz, you listen to Marco Rubio, you listen to Scott Perry, you listen to any of these T-Twizzlers from the past, and now the Freedom Caucus folks, and now the insurrection folks. You listen to any of them, they're all going to tell you how we're going to restrain and destroy government, how we're going to humiliate people, how we're going to divide us. Not, hey, how can your kids get a better education? How can you afford college? I just took my kid to an engineering camp at a very prestigious university, $75,000 a year. And I'm going, sadly, my kid's probably never going to be able to go there. He's a bright kid. Better get really good grades because I can't dig that deep and pay $75,000 a year for college. But our elitists, they don't care because it's all about them. So when you remember someone like Donald Rumsfeld, that's where my mind goes. Because while, yes, he was the architect of everything horrible that happened in Iraq, he was the architect of all of the criminality there. He was still the guy who was at the beginning of destroying our economy. He was still the guy who had his fingerprints over a whole lot of horrible. And for that, I hope history remembers him because I know I will. Horrible stuff, horrible times. But again, we can learn, we can move forward, and we can elect people who are going to say, we're going to be better. It seems that it's that easy to me. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1892. That was the day that 3,800 workers at the Carnegie Steel Company in Homestead, Pennsylvania, were thrown into the streets and locked out of their jobs. The plant was located 7 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. The general manager of the plant, Henry Clay Frick, was determined to break the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers Union. The union had won a strong contract 3 years before, and Frick wanted to weaken their position. The union only represented the skilled workers in the plant. Frick calculated he could break the union because they only accounted for less than a fifth of the workforce. But when Frick began to slash wages and demand increased production, even the unorganized workers voted overwhelmingly to support a strike. The workers refused to accept the changes, and Frick locked them out. Conveniently, Andrew Carnegie was traveling in England and Scotland during the conflict, but he supported his manager's decision. Carnegie sent Frick a message reading, "We approve of anything you do. We are with you to the end." Frick ordered the construction of a giant wall around the plant. The wall stretched 3 miles long and 12 feet high and was topped with sharp barbed wire. The workers called it Fort Frick. They, in turn, organized Homestead. Picket shifts and patrols were formed. Frick sent in his personal army of 300 Pinkertons on a barge to try and sneak into town. The workers' patrol spotted the barge and sounded an alarm. Frick's Pinkertons were met by thousands of workers in a bloody battle. 9 workers and 3 Pinkertons were killed. In the end, Pennsylvania's governor sent in the state militia, thus clearing the way for scabs to enter the plant. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the...
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a week it has been. The Supreme Court wanting to repeal the 20th century, roads buckling from the heat, the Select Committee on January 6th, the fun around that. So much Wingnut Week in Review to get to, and here to share some thoughts on the week that was. I've asked our all-star panel to come talk with us. Chris Hahn, syndicated radio host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Also, Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition. Scott, thanks for being here.
What's up, Rick?
And, of course, my favorite reporter on the whole planet, Sarah Burris, reporter over at RawStory. Sarah, thanks for being here.
I am always happy.
So let's fire up with the big story of the Supreme Court. Another moment where our 6-3 conservative court, or corporatist court, has done another job of repealing the 20th century. Scott, let's go to you with the decision to basically uphold Arizona's law and do away with what was left of the 1965 Voters' Rights Act.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives Congress more, I guess, oomph on their willingness to move, and they're going to have to react to it in some sort of way because it's utterly ridiculous. They're basically validating this voter suppression and these laws that are pretty racist across the country, and it's very disappointing, but it's not surprising. It's also another, I guess, excuse for us to approach expanding the bench, because I don't think that the Supreme Court is representative, obviously, of America, and it has to be. And as of right now, you just have basically it's a Trump-controlled Supreme Court. Until that changes, we're going to have these same kind of decisions reaching for the next few years and whatnot. So we're going to need some kind of catalyst that brings this to change. The one thing that I think will backfire on this is they're making these restrictive voting laws, but at the same time, they're saying that voting and elections are a fraud. So it's going to be really tough to turn out those voters. Democratic voters, on the other hand, are going to go through the motions and look through all the ideas all the rules as to what qualifies them to vote, how are they going to be able to vote to ensure that they do. Republicans, on the other hand, they're going to try and rush them out last minute. And at that point, those laws will affect them negatively because they won't be able to register to vote. They won't be able to vote in the right precinct or whatnot. There won't be much latitude there. So I think this is all going to backfire in the long run. They also face the DOJ lawsuit right now in Georgia, and that'll spread to other states as well. So I think it's just part of our longer fight. We expected it, but we didn't expect it to be this bad.
Yeah, I'm looking at it, and I was kind of surprised in reading some of the stuff that came out from the decision, basically going, yeah, okay, we know that it's discriminatory, but that's okay. It's okay to have unequal outcomes. Let's go to the aggressive progressive. Chris, what were your thoughts?
Totally expected, right? They are completely in the pocket of the right wing. They have made the Supreme Court a joke. I'm a lawyer, as you may or may not know, had a lot of respect for the Supreme Court. Going through law school, reading these opinions of these people on both sides of the aisle making decisions in the best interest of this country over the last 2 centuries. And to see what they've done to voting rights in the last 10 years, it just makes me and everybody else who study the law and believes in law and order and justice and the access to the ballot makes us sad, but it also makes us angry. And frankly, I agree with what Scott said. I think it is a catalyst to make Democrats move on voting reforms in the Senate and in the House. I don't think that Joe Manchin wants his career's epitaph to be he's the guy that oversaw the undoing of the American democratic experiment. I think he wants to find a way to get in there and actually make this happen. He's floated the idea of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Stacey Abrams has endorsed that. I think you're going to see some changes to the filibuster, and I think that there'll be people that will go along with it that will be unexpected to you, so that we can see people vote in this country free and clear of it. And like Scott said, Democrats are going to come out and vote, and Republicans are going to be turned off by this voting's a fraud thing. But here's the thing: I can organize around, where people vote, what ID they need to have, what other restrictions it is for register, et cetera, the days, the times. I can't organize around I can change the outcome if I don't like it. And the question I have for the Supreme Court is when that gets to them, and it will, where will they stand on that? It's one thing to say a state can say, I'm going to choose the time and place and manner for people to vote. It's another thing for a state to say, I'm going to allow a partisan legislature choose the winner of an election. That is not American. That is not democracy. And that cannot stand. And if this court, or any other court for that matter, upholds those types of laws, you're going to see people in the streets like you've never seen before. And quite frankly, I'm not one to march, but I'm going to march for that.
No, I mean, I see as where I am. I think all of this comes back to, we haven't done enough marching. We haven't done enough, rattling the cages, so to speak. And they feel they can get away with this stuff. Sarah, wanted to get your initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, it is long past time to take to the streets. Very long past time. For folks who don't know what the Supreme Court said, the Arizona law, the super restrictive voting laws there, they said that it doesn't violate Article 2 in the Voting Rights Act, which says that you can't specifically target people based on race or gender or all of those things. But what the Arizona law, and I would argue the Georgia law as well, what that does is it really just targets Democrats, which I guess isn't in the Voting Rights Act. So there you go. Like they're just
Right.
like, okay, well, we're just going to go after the Democrats because that's not in there. People of color, we're not going to talk about you guys, but we're just going to kill the Democrats here. And so that's sort of what I feel like they've sort of weaseled their way into. Chris was talking about the Supreme Court. Every time a decision comes out, I just imagine Brett Kavanaugh just throwing back beers, being like, "I got an opinion for you," know. So it makes me sad because I too held them in such high esteem, and now they're just kind of schmucky. It's very sad.
No, I mean, and what's bothering me, and Chris, maybe you can speak to this. I mean, we're seeing decisions coming out of this court that basically is repealing the 20th century. I mean, you go back to the Janus decision, which is something that I think was a horrible decision, basically undoing a good portion of what built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. All of the advancements that we had, the progress that we had of the 20th century. It seems this court wants to roll back. We're going to bring back the Alabama voting test. We're going to bring back the days of Lochner. We're going to bring back all of the bad old days, and it seems like from where I'm sitting, there's almost nothing that we can do to stop them from doing it other than vote and get out in the streets.
That is the only thing we can do. The only thing we can do is win elections, right? And the problem that Democrats have had over the years, been one of my big frustrations, is that we come out for the presidential year and we sit out the midterms, and more importantly, we sit out local elections in the midterms. We have to be on guard all the time. The Republicans have been building up benches. They've been electing people to school boards and dog catcher and mayors and city councils, and Democrats just wait for the presidential year and show up sometimes if they like the guy, if the person, makes them fall in love. Democrats, they have to fall in love. Republicans have to fall in line. This is a battle. And it is a battle that the Republicans came with a gun and Democrats came with like a flashlight to try to look who is there.
Blinky.
We need to make sure that we are fighting every step of the way for every seat ever that is on the ballot. We've got to come out, we've got to organize, and we've got to be ready. Because look, courts have made bad decisions in the past in this country. There's lots of them. We could go through the history of this country. There's dozens of infamous decisions by the Supreme Court that were overturned by the voters through Congress, through constitutional amendments, and through new court members being appointed because Democrats or other progressives, when Republicans were progressive, kept winning elections and putting new people on the court. We need to have a court that understands that the right to vote doesn't necessarily mean you're just allowed to vote. The right to vote means that working people who have to work during the day have an ability to vote when it's convenient for them, that they can vote and it shouldn't have to take 8 hours to vote. I think we need a law in this country that says it's got to be faster than getting Domino's, right? 30 minutes or less to cast your ballot. This should not take all day. I live in New York State. I have never waited more than 15 minutes to vote. I see these lines and I just wonder, I'm amazed at the organization to get people to wait in those lines. I won't wait in line for anything. I won't wait in line for ice cream, and I love ice cream. So I'm amazed at the organization that has gone into it. But I'm telling you, when you tell a group of people that they can't vote, that makes them vote more, makes them more likely to vote, makes them enthusiastic about voting, and makes them get other people to vote with them.
I hope you're right, Sarah. I look at this, and on his point, I've never waited more than 15 minutes, but that's because I'm in a predominantly red area. I'm in a 65-35 Republican, insane, crazy old. But I've never waited longer than 15 minutes, and like him, I can't imagine standing in line for 8 hours to vote.
Whenever I was in college, 2004, we ended up having to stand in line for probably, I want to say maybe 2 hours. They had cut a bunch of the polling places for on-campus people or near-campus people. But, Northwest Oklahoma City, I've never had to wait, long at all. I just started voting by mail, though, because first of all, I don't want to stand in line, but secondly, why not? Why not just throw it in there and be done with it early on?
Because we don't want people voting, Sarah. We don't want people voting. What was that Paul Waywick quote? We don't want everyone to vote. Our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Right.
Yeah. And that's how Republicans operate. The more people that vote, the more Democrats win, and the fewer people that vote, the more Republicans win. And they made it very clear, they have said the quiet part out loud.
They can't compete. They can't compete with ideas.
No.
They don't have any. They don't have any ideas. Even the people who support them don't like their ideas. They like our ideas until we tell them who came up with the idea.
Right.
Right. Republicans don't have ideas anymore. They have slogans and they have racism and they have fear that person who's going to take your job, even though, look, if everybody was into capitalism like Republicans say they were, people would compete for their job. They would work harder. They would change their profession. They would educate themselves to change with the times. We wouldn't have to be so protectionist in the way we do things in this country. But they don't have ideas to get people to vote. So the only way they maintain their minority rule in this country is by changing the election map and by making it harder for people to vote in states like Georgia and Texas, where they are losing now. They've been losing ground every year. They're about to lose Texas. Trust me, that scares them to death. That's why all these governors around the country are buying into this Texas, border fiasco that Greg Abbott's trying to utilize to distract Texans from his failure to lead Texas through crises, whether it be the winter where, they got 2 inches of snow and hundreds of people died and didn't have power, or now, it's hot in the summer. The grid wasn't prepared for cold in the winter or hot in the summer. Way to go, Texas government. Way to go, 30 years of Republican-only rule. You want to know why they got people at the border right now? They don't want you thinking about the fact that your air conditioner's broken and that Texas could go blue. And once Texas goes blue, it's all over in this country.
Well, that is kind of the hope, right? The hope is Texas does wake up and we move this country in a different direction. Scott, I want you to jump in on this because, he makes an interesting point. Republicans haven't had any ideas for a very long time, and the ideas that they did have were bad and got us into the mess that we're in. But they do know how to scare people. They do know how to throw out a boogeyman. They do know how to make people afraid of things that they don't even understand.
Right, Mr. Potato Head and things like that. I think one of the things that happened with the Democrats since they became in leadership now, and it's completely changed the dynamic with everything. One of the things I've been doing is I've been talking more behind the scenes and not vocally as much about criticizing Democrats or what we need to do or talking leadership as much publicly. And I think that's starting to spill over now because we gave them the opportunity to lead and some have not. And I think that we're going to hold them accountable, the ones that have not. The ones that, I think we've been getting vaccinated. We had the attack on the Capitol to deal with. We impeached the former president again. We had Biden-Harris administration come in, and that took a while to get in here. And so we just kind of demasked. We just are getting back into a society point of some sort of civility with at least half of the country. So, we had that opportunity to lead. I think what Chris is talking about us going to the streets and whatnot, I think that time is coming. I'm not sure exactly what's going to be the first thing to spark it, but I think people are back to a comfortable feel about that. And everyone seems to be antsy, but also that means that we have energy returning to us. Because I don't know about anybody else, but after 5 years of every single day, 18 to 20 hour work days, a constant barrage of all this nonsense and propaganda, I had to sit there and decompress for a second and figure out, how do we move from this position of us, being outraged at a constant and come up with the ideas of like, okay, how do we turn this into law? How do we move the needle on this or that? And it just was so complex, and we had no time to plan before this. So, we also had the Georgia elections. We had to fight on January 6th for people to stop overturning elections. We had to get gotcha videos of senators across the country. We were tracking them down. I mean, it really is. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for how much work that we've done and how much we've done to save this country as of right now. And I think that we've got the momentum, or momentum, people hate that word, but we've got the momentum to use here. I think after the 4th, something will happen that brings everybody, at least normal Americans, together to push for all of this nonsense to just, it'll be outrageous. And I think people are going to look at, when the smoke settles on COVID, they're going to want somebody to blame. We're going to have a grieving period. It's going to be sort of along the lines, I would assume, of like 9/11. We're going to have to deal with that at some point. We're going to have to deal with January 6th. There's going to be constant court cases. You have the indictments we'll talk about that later. But long story short, Democrats haven't really had that chance to lead, and we haven't pushed them enough publicly to be like, here's what we need to do. But I'll tell you what, I did have conversations with the original plans that they had in regards to investigating January 6th. And I lost my mind privately. And I said, this needs to be a select committee, period.
Yep. And it should have been done on the 21st, the day after they took power.
Now, don't give them an opportunity to play these games. Just move straight into a Benghazi-like select committee.
Yeah. I wanted them to impeach Trump on January 6th when they came back into session. I'm like, why are we waiting? We know what happened here. We all saw it. Get a vote right now. Let's see how people feel right now while they're hot, because people were hot that night. You might have even got Kevin McCarthy to vote to impeach Trump that night.
True.
I don't know why they didn't just come while they were hiding under a desk. They should have been drafting articles of impeachment. It was ridiculous.
Got to take a quick break right here, guys. Stick around through the break. On the other side, we're going to get into, it's kind of hot outside, and some of the things going on around there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929. That was the day 1,800 streetcar drivers and motormen walked off the job at New Orleans Public Service. The Amalgamated Association of Street and Electric Railway Employees, Division 194, had been in contract negotiations for months. They demanded higher wages, a closed shop, and an end to arbitrary discharges. The company was looking to bust the Amalgamated with the creation of a company union. For the first few days, the strike was quiet. But then, on July 5th, the company brought in strikebreakers. 10,000 union members and their supporters gathered to stop scab service. The company attempted to run a lone streetcar down Canal Street. Immediately, it was pelted with bricks and stones. The scab driver bailed. Another 4 cars attempted to leave the car barn. Pitched battles raged for hours with police and scabs. 2 union men were shot and killed by scabs and hundreds more injured. Trade unions throughout the city threatened a general strike. The strike raged on for 2 months. Throughout the summer, trolleys were burned to the ground, tracks destroyed, switches cemented in place. As the weeks wore on, conditions became more desperate. That's when Clovis and Beanie Martin, former Division 194 conductors, decided to help out. They had since left public transit to open the Martin Brothers coffee stand and restaurant. They declared to their former union brothers, quote, "We are with you, heart and soul. We are with you till hell freezes over." They offered free supersized sandwiches for the poor boys. The strikers would eventually win some of their demands. The sandwiches would become a standard in New Orleans cuisine, better known as the po' boy. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I'm sure everyone saw the pictures of the street buckling, the cables melting. We've heard all the stories of people dying, and yet still Congress hasn't done much to move forward on an infrastructure plan, because at the end of the day, this does come back to our infrastructure when you're talking about major cities in the U.S. having rolling blackouts. And it's infuriating to me that we're still talking about infrastructure and not getting stuff done. Here to share some thoughts on, well, the state of where we are and maybe where we need to go. I've asked our all-star panel to stick around. Chris Hahn, the syndicated radio host and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Scott Dworkin, co-host of Democratic Coalition. And, of course, our great friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at RawStory. Guys, thanks for sticking around.
Anytime.
You bet.
So we've all seen these stories. Let's start with you, Sarah. We've all seen these stories of the heat, the misery, yet still nothing out of Congress being done.
Which I think is a really good way for everybody to start talking about the need for infrastructure. I know that yes, there's the heat problem, right? Like we've got giant fires and things are melting, but at the same time, Oklahoma has had more rain in the last week than we've had in, I want to say, the last 3 months. So we're dealing with an enormous amount of overspill in our dam system. So, I mean, Oklahoma never had a lake that was in it until the Army Corps of Engineers came in, and every single lake in the state of Oklahoma has been created by the Army Corps of Engineers thanks to the New Deal. So you've got all of these dams and all these spillways that are now finally, like doing what they should be. And you got farmers who can't cut wheat right now because of that. So thank goodness for all of these things that we have because of the New Deal. And that's why we need another one of these things. You've got cities that have, because people throw away those handy wipe things in the toilet, and they pour grease down the sewers, you end up having these massive glaciers of hardened just stuff in our sewer system, where they actually have to take pickaxes at them and try and break them apart. And so like our sewers end up being clogged because of stupid crap, not literal crap, just stupid crap. So we have lots of problems. This is not just a Texas heat issue or a melting roads issue. This is everything from water to sewers to drainage to dams, everything. And we haven't touched them for 100 years now. So I think it's time time to do something.
I know in Harrisburg, where I'm near, we were the sinkhole capital of the world for a while because our infrastructure under the ground is so old and broken and deteriorated. Buses were being swallowed up, garbage trucks, the back end of them being swallowed up. And it's, again, the failure repeatedly, not just the here now, but the last term and the term before that and before that. We failed to have the vision that I think Joe Biden has finally, and I'm grateful for the idea that we need big, chunky, massive investment. Scott, I want to get your thoughts.
The thing is, I want to say too, like every single state in the country, every city in the country has a problem. If we can just start talking about those problems to the actual senator, to the member of Congress, and saying, like, you should vote for this because it will fix this thing in your district. That's the stuff that really turns a light bulb on for them.
Scott, your thoughts?
I lived in D.C. for years and years, and I don't know if they've ever patch the roads. It's one of the worst, I guess. I just traveling around here on the roads is pretty terrible, for a lot of different reasons. Using sand for ice, and then putting salt on top of it because the sand doesn't work, and then that makes a mesh of nonsense. But yeah, I mean, like, what I didn't understand is how Republicans didn't even grasp the basics of infrastructure and what it is nowadays. And you're talking about moving things back, right, Rick? I mean, they didn't want to include the internet as part of our infrastructure. It didn't make any sense. They didn't want to include the power grid. They wanted to just be, go to this coal and people just breaking marble over. Like, I don't know what they're thinking, but that's just not how the world works. And we're not a third world country. So can we not act like it? And so that's got to be part of it. We have places in this country which has a populace that have no internet, right? And we've got to count on what? Elon Musk to do the work? Like, I don't understand what we're going to do here, but it's unacceptable. And I just wish that people would be able to get on the same page, at least. And the one thing that I was happy about is at least President Biden got people into a room that were of different parties to agree on something, even though it was complete making it smaller what we needed to be. Yeah. It was something, but it still is just like, what are you even fighting about? What are we going to do with the money instead? Like, what are you talking about? They're sitting there screaming about nothing. And it's just like, oh, well, they think the internet, they just want to expand the internet. I want to talk infrastructure. What are you talking about? Like, it's just mind games, and you're not accomplishing anything.
And what's worse, Scott, is it's their constituents that don't have internet.
Right.
Democrats live in cities. We have internet. I don't have an internet problem. I've never had an internet problem. Ever since there's been internet, I've had internet, right? It's somebody in rural Oklahoma that's screwed up by their not having internet infrastructure in that part of the world. They don't even get it. We talked about maybe it's going to be hot girl summer. It's hot planet summer. We've got 115 degrees in Portland, freaking Oregon. They don't even have the air conditioning there. They've never needed it before in their life. We've got to do something about the climate. We've got to improve the way people live their lives. That is infrastructure. We are running out of time. I quite frankly feel that we've passed the tipping point on climate, and that there might not be any way back from it. And we've got to start preparing for the effects of climate change instead of really trying to stop it, because it might be gone. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be pursuing green energy, clean energy, etc. But when you look at a map and it's 118 degrees in Canada, I'm sorry, we've missed the boat on this for a very long time because we've been stuck in this traditionalist thing. I live on Long Island, and I used to be head of the United Way of Long Island, which is a big charity. And I used to always have this line. I used to say, people live in this kind of false paradox of what they are. Here on Long Island, in Nassau and Suffolk County, we have 3.5 million people. If we were a city, we are the third largest city in the United States of America. We're bigger than Chicago, almost comparable to Houston. The problem is, on Long Island, we like to pretend we're a farming and fishing community, that we're a bunch of farmers and fishermen. And that some of us take the train into the city to work and blah, blah, blah. But there's 3.5 million people. We have all the problems of a city here. I want to build sewers and I want to build infrastructure to deal with the city problems. But they don't want that. Oh, you're going to Queensify Suffolk County. We have that problem on a massive scale in the United States of America. We are living in a time and place that no longer exists. And we have people in the Senate who are far too freaking old to be making any decisions. Doesn't mean that they're old people can't make decisions, but old people that don't recognize reality on the planet really need to go, because they're not helping move things along. And it's not just Republicans. There are some Democrats who are living in the 1960s in the United States Senate as well. We have
Feinstein, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, we have to acknowledge the reality, right? People live in cities. They've been moving to cities for years, or they've been moving to suburbs and cities for years. We've got to connect those cities through high-speed rail, not this crap that we build in this country that we call high-speed rail. We got to have like Tokyo-style high-speed rail. We have to find ways. This way we get people out of the car. We could electrify these trains with some clean energy. It's going to save our environment and get people around quicker and help us grow as a nation. We've got to figure it out. We can't just keep living in the 1950s. I think that was your point you were making, Scott. I was trying to.
Oh yeah, no.
It's
about creating. It's creating that environment, because I don't understand exactly why people are so backwards on it. I mean, look at how cool it was, and I can't believe I'm saying this about President Biden, but how cool it was when he pulled up in that Ford, the EV
F-150, the electric, yeah,
and he just speeds away. And I was like,
that was hot.
If Donald just did that one time, EV cars would have been in 4 years ago like they are now, but maybe they weren't at that same spot. But like, that's the kind of stuff that we need, where it's like we can produce our own energy. Why are we buying gas from other countries? Why are we invading other countries for that gas? Why are we making deals with Russia for that gas when we can have our own jobs and make our own energy here? It doesn't make any sense.
And Scott, here's the thing. It's not like there's millions of people working in oil and coal in the United States of America. Right? This is just another false paradox that the Republicans paint. It's us versus them. Look, these liberals want you to get rid of your gasoline tank. Anybody who's ever driven an electric car said, holy crap, I love this car. Right? This is just a lot of nonsense. People aren't breaking coal. Even if you have a coal mine, you need 50 people to work in it, not 50,000. It's a big machine that mines coal for a big multinational corporation. This is not a lot of jobs. This is just another wedge that the Republican Party has successfully used and that we have not properly messaged back.
No, you're absolutely right. And I would go beyond that. It's even more than the Republican Party. It's the moneyed interest of this country who are the ones who are benefiting off of this. And they're always really good at dividing the working class of this country. Because I always say, look, I want solar jobs, I want wind jobs, I want all of that stuff to come around. They go, but what about the coal miners? Those are union coal miners. I go, yeah, they are. But they can do other things. We can get them to put up solar panels and windmills because they have skills. We can do that. We have the ability. We have the technology. Rick? We just don't have the will.
You know what, Rick? When the car was invented, the guys who made buggy whips had a problem with it. What are we going to do with all these buggy whips we're making? Yo, they're going to have cars? What are we going to do with all these stables we built for all these horses? What are we going to, screw you. Time moves on. I don't care. Honestly, I don't care about things that are in the past. We've got to move on. At some point, we've got to just give up on these things that don't matter anymore. I don't know if you hear me anymore.
Yeah, so I want to get real quick because I want to transfer over to the guy who's in hot water, Weaselberg, the Trump organization charged this week. Want to get into that unindicted co-conspirator number one, Scott? Let me go with you because it's looks like the Trump organization in a little trouble.
I can't tell you how good it feels to have someone who called me a fraud, who said that I should be in prison, who attacked me and my family for years and years, and helped direct those efforts to just time and time again see them in handcuffs. And it's not just that, but because of this fraud, it's leveraged to get to the former president of the United States. And I like to call him that when it involves crimes, because I want to remind people where he was for so long. I mean, we're definitely on a road right now. I don't think people understand the gravity of what's happened here. They would not indict Weisselberg unless it was an open and shut case where it was clear. And it is really, really hard, as Chris can probably attest. to beat a document case. Like, this is a document-based case. And so it's not as much about how he was feeling or what he was thinking during it. It's, you're an accountant, you did this is illegal, and you did it for years, and you kept it off the books on purpose. And, not only that, I'm guessing this opens doors to the rest of everything else. And so I think that they can play it down all they want, but this is absolutely devastating to him. And I just don't see how he can come out from underneath it. The most important part of this all is it's the first one to indict really outside of his presidency.
Yeah.
And I think that people are going to pile on, because where did I get a phone call from today was Georgia. And so all I've got to say is that I hear a lot of things happening right now from different states that look to suing him because he owes them money for rallies or destruction or a property or something that he's done along with that. And old property developers that want to sue him for money. I mean, there's so much stuff coming at him on top of E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit. It's just too much discovery. It's too much money. I think that Republicans are going to drop him and act like they never saw him before. They never met him before. But they'll just move to another idol. So it'll be Ron DeSantis or somebody.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, but I'm not getting my hopes up. I'm not getting my hopes up on these cases coming out of New York. I know there'll be more indictments coming down. I'm definitely not getting my hopes up on the Republican Party dropping him in the next couple of years. They are.
No, I think it'll be. I think it's in the next 6 months. That's what I'm thinking. Like,
I think they're too stupid. I don't think they're paying attention enough to really understand that. I think they'll hitch their wagons to Donald Trump for way too long, and then by the time it's the cutoff point where they're just like, okay, we're done, I think it'll be long past when they'll be able to save themselves.
They can't be that stupid. Are they that stupid? They're that stupid?
Yes.
They really are.
Stupid.
They really are.
Look, the case in point this week with the January 6th Select Committee vote. 2 Republicans came along for the ride on that. The other 190 Republicans were also running for their lives on January 6th. But the former guy doesn't want them voting on the January 6th commission. He wants to say, oh, it was just tourists. So they went right with the former guy. That's the problem I have right now. Kevin McCarthy called him up and bitched him out on January 6th. And now Kevin McCarthy's like, whatever you want, boss. Whatever you want, boss. I want to be Speaker of the House. So it's, I do this rap all the time on my radio show. Why are people even in Congress if they're not going to stand up for what America is?
Yes.
Right? Why are you even there? You need that stupid freaking pain. You could buy it in the gift shop. It is ridiculous that these people will trade in their soul and trade in this nation for one more term in the House of Representatives. My wife's been running for Congress for fucking 28 days. It sucks. It's the worst.
Right.
Yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to curse, Rick.
There was that. But I got to be honest. I watched Trump's lawyers go on, and it was one of those things that made me question the existence of God, because why weren't they struck down by lightning with all the lies and stuff that came out of their mouth?
That's what lawyers are supposed to do. Bless their hearts.
Yeah. Look, I never get mad at lawyers for defending somebody. That's what lawyers are there for. I'm a lawyer. Everybody has a right to a defense, no matter how guilty they are. And we have a system that's an adversarial system for a reason, because we used to think it was better for 100 guilty people to go free than for one innocent person to go to jail. I think we've forgotten that in this country.
I don't know. I think we just saw it this week with Bill Cosby.
Yeah, we did.
God.
Had to go there, didn't I?
Yeah.
No. I mean, that's somebody who belongs in prison. That's somebody who should never be free. That's the disgrace. And it sucks that somebody. I guess my understanding, Chris, I don't know or Sarah, if you know, but apparently on the back end, like there was a scheme to try and have a gotcha moment so they could prosecute, and that's how they prosecuted him. So it's I don't understand why they have to go that route when you have 90 win. Like
he made a deal with the prosecutor. He made a deal with the prosecutor that statements he made in a prior trial would not be used in any other trials, and then they use those statements in a trial. He should be in jail. for sure. He's a guilty man, but you can't do that. You can't be a prosecutor and tell a defendant that, no, don't worry, you can talk freely here, we won't use this against you, and then use it against them, as bad as this guy is.
Yeah,
so, by the way, and the guy who did that deal was one of Trump's impeachment attorneys, the former prosecutor, I'm dropping his name, from Philadelphia.
Bruce Castor.
So, I mean, there's a special place in hell for Bruce Castor, right? He doesn't get another strike from me. He defended Trump. He screwed up the Cosby prosecution. This is a guy, God.
There you go. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this with our all-star panel, Chris Hahn, Scott Dworkin, and Sarah Burris. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1922. That was the day that railroad workers across the United States walked off the job. During World War I, the railroads had been nationalized by President Woodrow Wilson. Seen as a vital cog of the war machine, the railroads were to be kept running no matter what. Because they were essential to the war effort, this gave railroad workers leverage. They won the 8-hour workday and improved working conditions. But when the war ended, railroads went back under private control. The seat at the table with management quickly was pulled out from under labor. The private owners eliminated Sunday and holiday overtime pay. Then wages were slashed for many railroad workers. The railroad companies promised the Big Four unions that no further cuts were coming. These included the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, the Brotherhood of Firemen and Engineermen, the Order of Railroad Conductors, and the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. A strike vote was held across the industry. The Big Four voted not to strike, but the other unions decided to walk off the job. The response by the companies and the government was swift and brutal. A federal court issued an injunction against the strikers. They were prohibited from even talking about the strike to the press. Thousands of company gun thugs and National Guard troops were mobilized against the strikers. 10 workers were killed. With both guns and the courts lined up against them, the railroad workers did not stand much of a chance. The strike was defeated. The failed strike showed the importance of building worker solidarity across job type if labor had any hope of standing up to the bosses. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So a little fun down at the border because, why not? Why not have one of the people who was at the January 6th insurrection, this YouTube guy, Anthony Aguero, why not be there with, Marjorie Taylor Greene and who's the idiot from Colorado, Lauren Boebert? That Madison Cawthorn was there. They had a whole bunch of these conservatives running down to get a little time at the border because, hey, why not? It's not like we got any real problems going on in the country. I'm here to share some thoughts on, our traders going to the border and now this select committee that is finally, after all these months, maybe going to start doing some work. That's why I've kept my all-star panel, Chris Hahn, Sarah Burris, and Scott Dworkin. Guys, thanks for sticking around.
Thanks for keeping us.
So let's start with you, Chris. You got Boebert, you got Cawthorn, you got the whole cabal of crazy down there with this YouTube guy who was at the January 6th insurrection. This is ludicrous. This is ridiculous, but it's who these people are.
I grew up in the church, and my mother used to always say, you will know them by the company they keep, right? These people are hanging out with these terrorists who stormed the Capitol. Let's not call them terrorists. They need to be called terrorists because that's what they were. Just like The Confederacy was a group of terrorists that came into this country or wanted to overthrow our republic. As for their trips to the border, their little fantasy island trips, here's the problem. They cannot attack Joe Biden. They're not laying a glove on him. You know why? Because their base is a bunch of old white guys, and Joe Biden's an old white guy. So they're having a really hard time demonizing Joe Biden. So every now and then they try to demonize Kamala Harris, but nobody cares about the vice president. That's why we had the great HBO series Veep, because nobody cares about the vice president. It's comical. So they can't lay a hand on Joe Biden, so they got to create these fake crises, whether it be the border, whether it be critical race theory. They got to find a straw man for them to burn down because they've got nothing else to talk about. They've got no issues to push. They've got no ideas. And the fact that they're hanging out at the border with a terrorist talking about danger to this country, and they're hanging out with one of these guys who was a terrorist who tried to kill them on January 6th. If they would have gotten their hands on Lauren Boebert, you think they would have told her, knowing that she was different from anybody else in the Congress? They would have killed her like they killed anybody else. And they don't know. And they're going to sit there at the border with that person. They should be ashamed of themselves.
And not one of them voted for the January 6th commission. Not one of them stepped forward and condemned this stuff. To me, they're part of it. Sarah, your thoughts?
Well, the vote for the select committee was at the same time that these guys were down at the border. So all of the people who, you had over 100 Republicans who voted against the measure. The ones who didn't even vote at all, it was because they were at the Trump worship rally. And it really was like this rally. It wasn't his supporters. It was a rally of elected officials who were kissing his ring and whatever else they want to kiss, and worshiping him, hoping that somehow, his sparkle will rub off on them. And
it was like the wedding scene in Godfather 1.
Yeah, and it's like they're trying to raise money off of this stuff. Yeah. However many photos they can get with themselves with Trump, or if they can do like a selfie with Trump, behind them. This is all about raising money for them. And I don't know why, because Marjorie Taylor Greene has enough money for all of them. Yeah. So you would think that she'd be just writing them all a check from her account, but I guess not. She didn't really love them that much.
No, it's about the cash. Scott, your thought?
Yeah, she, it's an interesting PR stunt that is a waste of time, a waste of money. I think that the whole push to have, Vice President Harris go to the border, then when she goes to the border, they're like, that's not good enough. And it's like, okay, well, like, it wasn't to appease you in the first place. Like, that's not why she went there. But okay, these things are planned out. They're methodical when they're done by professionals. And it's not just something that you just swoop in and do. She actually analyzed the situation and went to the root of the problem first, and then made her way up, or I guess back and then down. But it's not that simple. And, I wish things were as simple as Republicans try and paint them to be. But it's not as simple as just putting up a wall that people can walk around. Yeah. It's much more complex than that, or dig a hole beneath El Chapo style. Like it really is. I think that there's just more to this story. And I think as people get into reality now, back into real life and real spaces, they won't have the opportunity to live in as much of this fantasy land of, we're going to play cosplay and end up hurting Capitol police officers in a fit of white rage so that we can go to the Capitol and try and overturn our elections. It's just going to go down in history that anyone who touched it, I mean, I don't know how to compare it to anything else except for how Nazis should be treated in society today. Yeah. That is how seditionists should be treated after this. And anyone who supported it in any way, financially helped organize it, anybody who invited people there, they should all be disavowed from our society and never be allowed to speak publicly ever again.
We better disavow them from our society. We better do it soon.
Well, we're not, though, Chris. All we're doing is we're slapping them on the wrist right now. I mean, some of the first people to plead guilty, don't do it again, $500 fine. Sorry, don't do it again.
I'm less concerned with the people who were like foot soldiers in the war than the people who were leading it.
No,
Right?
I want all of them. I
Edging
want
them
all the
on,
way to the
getting them
top.
there. I want those people hung, frankly, because they
Those
are
militia people.
traitors, and it is.
They're already trying to plan for August. Like, that's the thing. We're already hearing language about them plotting for August, doing this stuff again, and it's the militias that are doing it. It's not the probation.
Well, you know what? If they show up in August with a president who's going to take it seriously, they better be rounded up and arrested or shot dead if they need to be. We hear about this Ashley Babbitt. Former President Trump wants to know who killed Ashley Babbitt. Donald Trump killed Ashley Babbitt, and Ashley Babbitt killed herself because she was a terrorist who was inspired by a terrorist leader, Donald Trump, who doesn't believe in American values. And if they show up in August, our National Guard better be ready, and our Capitol better be well protected, and they better be meeting a fate like any other country that's ever stood toe-to-toe with the United States Army. And they will, I believe. So, it'll be a bad day for America, but maybe it'll end this.
Yeah. Now
there's a lot of barriers. Sorry? Oh, there's a lot of barriers that are built around this. And as a person who used to be a body man for people or elected officials, there is a red zone or a zone of no return. Yeah. Where they had an open shot in that hallway to then go after all these members of Congress, and that almost nearly ended everything there. But behind them was a tactical team who could have also opened fire on them. It could have been really, really bad. But because they were over-titled white people who were following the orders of the president, it made things really, really confusing to everybody around there. They were outnumbered. They were the fact that they did not have lethal weapons on every single one of them also made it so that they didn't use lethal weapons as often against them. But once that glass was broken, and when he's screaming, I don't know exactly what he was screaming, but I'm guessing it's along the lines of, "Do not move, I will shoot. Do not move, I will shoot."
Yeah.
Well, the thing is he was on that video with Ashley Babbitt. You can hear the people who are breaking the glass saying, "Gun, gun, he's got a gun." There were 2 or 3 people who said it. And so they were very well aware that there was a gun that was pulled on them. And the fact that she jumped through the window is just stupid. That's her own
There's
fault.
just one shot, but there's a person who knows how to shoot to kill, and that is what they know. They're not people who are inexperienced. The reason why they weren't hurt that day is because it wasn't a bunch of inexperienced cops. A lot of these people are Capitol Police officers or veterans who have been serving the military for forever, and then they come onto, to get welcomed under the Capitol Police Force because it's usually an honor. It's a step up in their minds in the law enforcement community, and it's something that can be really, really honorable. I can tell you this. I don't know what kind of intelligence people were getting, but I met with leaders of Black Lives Matter in D.C. I met with other activists in D.C., and we all knew better. And we said, warn everyone, there is no counter protest, nothing. Someone's going to get hurt. Stay away from it. Don't go to the Capitol. Even when I was driving to the Capitol, I got the phone calls and they said, do not come to the Capitol. You need to be in your home. I go to my home, and what we've talked about this before, and I'm told, oh, we got to search for something because they weren't sure if you're a soft target. We got to search for something.
I was working for Senator Schumer on 9/11, and that was a horrible day to be working in Congress. I obviously don't work in government anymore. I had a really rough time on January 6th. I thought, that to me, that was as emotional a day as September 11th was for me, to see our Capitol being treated like that, to see the peaceful transfer of power being threatened for the first time in our nation's history. It was disgusting. We can't ever let this happen again. And the only way we're not going to let it happen again is if we find the leaders and we hold them accountable. And by the way, we've got to hold some elected officials accountable as well.
Absolutely.
For edging it on.
Mm-hmm. All of that from top to bottom.
Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, Mo Brooks, former president of the United States. They need to be, I don't know you're trying for treason, but they are responsible for this, and they need to be held accountable. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I leave that to people much smarter than me, but something needs to be done.
No, I want the moneyed people who sponsor, who paid for all of this stuff, the people who paid for the buses, the people who funded these organizations, these Oath Keeper groups, these militia groups, funded all of this stuff from top to bottom. But yet we had a Supreme Court decision this week that said the state of California can't know who's giving all this dark money to Americans for Prosperity and all this. But yet we got to know who Ashley Babbitt is. To me, there's a bunch of messaging missing there.
Yeah, they look. There's, when you're in a criminal case, you're not relying on just the disclosure laws to find out who funded things. So hopefully we're going to find out who funded some of these things, who brought these people there, how they wound up there. There were people moving as a unit there. Who are they, right? Who are those guys in military fatigue with big weaponry moving as a unit? That was some scary. When you see that in a video, that's some scary stuff. If those people would have found my former boss, Chuck Schumer, or Speaker Pelosi, or the vice president, they would have killed them. And that's, I mean, this is America. We're not supposed to have this here. To hear the former guy talking about Banana Republic because, his chief financial officer who stole millions of dollars from the taxpayers of New York State being held accountable and calling that Banana Republic. No, Banana Republic is a president of the United States who lost an election, not conceding the election and welcoming his opponent to the White House, which has been our tradition in this country since we were founded. That, to me, is Banana Republic stuff. That man should not be allowed within 100 miles of the White House, and yet he's the likely Republican nominee in 2024.
No, you're right.
It's sickening.
You talk about the formations. I live not more than a mile away from a free gun range here in central Pennsylvania, where you see these groups. They come together, they practice their shooting, they're working in formation. This stuff is not in the secret. This stuff is out front. And I know a couple people will be happy to tell you they want August to happen. They want some kind of violence and problems, and they want to reinstall the former guy.
Well, if they come to Washington on August 6th with the intent of doing violence, they will leave in a body bag. We're not going to have a January 6th style riot at our Capitol ever again. And it just won't happen. And if it does happen, we've got bigger problems than we're even thinking of right now.
Sadly, you're right. Last question I wanted to get into is the January 6th subcommittee. Liz Cheney on the subcommittee, a good move, Scott?
That's a great way to ask it. Good move. I think that I would have preferred Kinzinger personally to that, but I also there's a possibility that McCarthy is not the one that fills out the rest of the slots because he's going to try and act like, oh, I'm not going to appoint anybody. So Speaker Pelosi might have the opportunity to still fill Kinzinger. Now, in regards to Liz Cheney, I think that she has said things that she can't come back from in regards to Republican philosophy and Trumpism and things like that. So I think that there is a real truth to the matter there. I also think that her dad knows stuff still and is still in the mix on a lot of things. And I think that she's more aware of the situation and the extent of it and how far things actually go up the chain. In reality, based on what I've seen, we're talking about the President of the United States directed a terrorist attack on our Capitol in the intent to throw a coup during the counting of the votes to at least stall so that he could have martial law and then extend and stall and then probably just stay in power for an indefinite amount of time. So we're talking about a true terrorist attack on our United States, and we cannot allow that to happen ever again. And I think this is the route that we're going to go. Based on the people I know, most of the people that are on this committee outside of Liz Cheney, they are not people to mess with. These are not people that, like with Aguilar, especially Raskin. Raskin is a person who is, I would say, crafty with how we prosecute people, and they can take subpoenas. They can bring them. They can put them in prison if they don't show up. This is a different world. This is not a Trump world anymore. And I think the sooner that they recognize it, the better off that they would be. But it's just not. I think you guys are right. I don't think that this is going to happen anytime soon.
Chris, 30 seconds. Your thought?
She's a name brand Republican. It was a good choice because she could say things and Republicans will hear it as a name brand Republican hearing it. It's career suicide for her. She's lighting her career on fire. The Republican Party is never going back to the party that was her father's party. But she's doing the right thing. I don't agree with Liz Cheney on almost anything policy-wise. She's doing the right thing here, and I appreciate it. And I think it was the right move by the speaker.
Sarah, last thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Kinzinger too. The more Republicans you have on this, particularly the ones that are on our side and that are rational, the more legitimacy, the more legitimacy that the committee is going to have, and Republicans can't attack it then.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. So, thanks so much, Scott, Sarah, Chris. Thanks so much for your time, your thoughts. Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Rick.
I appreciate our all-star panel on the thoughts that came out of that. If you've got any thoughts, questions, comments, I'd love to hear it. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Any future topics you want to hear the panel weigh in on, email us. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at Rick.
Next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.